tonight, in Behind the Movie, I'll be talking about the 1968 American psychological horror film written and directed by Roman Polanski, Rosemary's Baby. And later on, I'll be joined by Dominic from Dominic Talks Movies on YouTube, so make sure to listen all the way through to hear a discussion about this crazy movie. Hello everyone, how are you all doing? I'm your host, Jennifer Vega, and thank you all so much for being here. It really means a lot. I just want to thank you so much for all the support in the last episode. We have now an average of about 105 listeners, which is crazy. That's like a lot of people for a podcast. I thought it was going to be way smaller, and you guys are really supporting it, and it just means the world to me, so thank you guys so much. And I'm so excited to dive into this movie, and again, thank you Dominic for joining me at the end for our little talk about the movie. It was a lot of fun, and make sure to follow him on all his social medias. Everything will be linked down below. And before we get started, I just wanted to let you guys know that you guys can now support the podcast even more by writing a review on Apple Podcasts with iTunes and Google Podcasts, and just following us on Spotify. Just make sure to interact as much as you can because it really helps push the podcast out there, but just listening is enough, so thank you guys so much for that. And as always, you can support the podcast by heading over to anchor.fm/behindthemovie and giving us a follow there, and by giving a small monthly donation to help fund future episodes. I also just wanted to throw in a quick shout out to Rose for requesting Rosemary's Baby on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you so much for being so supportive. And yeah, let's just dive right in to the question of the week from last week, which was what comes to mind when you think of Rosemary's Baby. And the question of the week for next week's episode will be set at the very end of the podcast. I'll let you guys know how you can submit a response then and be involved in the episode. So, Kid Critic from YouTube said,
"Hey, it's Zayden, and what comes to mind when I hear about Rosemary's Baby, just immediately, is that very trippy scene with the baby carriage on like a mountain in vast nothingness. Then it goes to like candlelight, then it goes to like very trippy like scenery. It's just, I can't tell whether or not I should feel enlightened by it or terrified by it. It's just so like mismatched, but so perfectly put together. I don't know why, but that one scene has stuck with me for a very long while, and I just needed to vent about that."
I so agree with you on this, because that trippy scene has stuck with me for such a long time. And before this episode, I had only seen the movie once, and even then, I still remembered all of the creepy scenes that this movie has, because I think it just sticks with you. I think Polanski did a really good job with that, and just making scenes like be engraved in your brain, even though this movie, in my opinion, is as subtle as it could be. And another response that we got was from Janelle, and she says,
"Hi, I'm Janelle, and the first thing I think about when I think about Rosemary's Baby is like a devil baby. I've never watched the movie, but every time like that name comes up, I imagine like a little baby with horns and like red skin or something. So yeah."
I think what she said is so funny, and me and Dominic kind of talk about that at the end of the podcast, because people that haven't seen the movie might think that you see the baby, and you don't. And I think that's one of the coolest things that this movie has, because I think with horror, one of the best things a horror filmmaker could do is leave the audience with a little bit of ambiguity, because I think it's scarier to imagine ourselves how it looks like. And in the movie, Rosemary has such a crazy reaction to this baby that's hers.
What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?
He has his father's eyes.
What are you talking about? Guy's eyes are normal. What have you done to him, you maniac?
Satan is his father, not Guy.
And I think by not showing us the baby and only her reaction, we get to kind of put that image into our brains and think about how this baby might be looking like. And I think that's scarier. So yeah, thank you so much for the responses. And I do want to have a disclaimer. I want it to be known that I am not a fan of the director of this movie. Although I believe he made a good movie here, and he has made good movies, I like to separate him from it, separating the art from the artist, because he's just a terrible person. I do not support Roman Polanski. I just want to say that I was a little bit hesitant to talk about this movie because it's almost like giving him a platform again, but I just wanted to let it be known that I do not support him. And if you guys have no idea what he's done, go look it up on the internet. I'm sure there's a lot of articles on it, but today we're just going to be talking about the movie. And in the first episode of Behind the Movie, we focused on the scariest movie ever made, and today we quite possibly might be talking about one of the most cursed movies ever made. So Rosemary's Baby is actually based on the 1967 novel of the same name by Ear 11, which was the author's second published book, which ended up selling over 4 million copies, and it made it one of the top selling novels in the horror genre of the 1960s. And after this, there was said to have been a horror boom, meaning that a lot of horror movies started coming out, a lot of more horror pop culture, and it was getting more of a commercial gain, which I think is pretty cool, because I do think there was a big uprising in the late 60s of horror movies, and a lot of them are what have inspired horror movies today. So let's get to the production of the film. This movie was actually one of Polanski's American debut, which I thought was really cool. I didn't know that. Paramount Pictures executive Robert Evans said that he had admired Polanski's European films and had hoped to convince him to make an American debut with this movie, Rosemary's Baby. And so he did. Robert Evans actually says,
"There's one director who I had seen his work, from Knife in the Water to Cul-de-sac. I was fascinated with him. This is a talent. He could make this jump out of the screen."
Robert Evans knew that I was very much into skiing and racing, and he had a project called Downhill Races. He called me and suggested that I come over to talk about it. I was in America skiing somewhere. But he had script of downhill racers and bunch of galleys of a book called Rosemary's Baby. And he said, "I would like you to read this also first." I went to the hotel after that meeting and started reading. It really looked to me very much like a kitchen melodrama, for television. But as I read, I got deeper and deeper into it, and the suspense was such that I didn't stop until maybe 4 a.m. And next day I came back to the studio. I said, okay, let's do this one first.
And the movie ended up getting a budget of about $1.9 million, but as we'll get into later, that budget was too little for this movie. Polanski also ended up writing the script alongside directing, and he wrote the script in about 3 weeks, which I think is a pretty good time to write a script, honestly. But according to Polanski himself, he actually modeled the story really closely to the original novel. I'm not familiar with the original novel. I'm wondering if any of you guys watching or listening are. Let me know, because I'd love to hear if you know how similar, how different they are. But that would definitely be something cool to cover one day, like if I read the novel, seeing the differences and the similarities, because I really do like me some good book-to-movie adaptations. But when casting for the movie began in the summer of 1967, at first Polanski actually wanted to hire his own wife, Sharon Tate, to play Rosemary, and a lot of other big names at the time were considered, such as Patty Duke and Goldie Hawn. Obviously, Mia Farrow was cast, and actually super random, but when I was looking up information about the cast, I did not know that she was married to Frank Sinatra. That's so crazy to me, because I don't know, I just forget that all of these big names lived together during the same time. I don't know. Just me maybe, but actually this marriage caused production of the movie to be delayed because Farrow's husband, Frank Sinatra, served her divorce papers via a corporate lawyer in front of the casting crew during filming, which, what? Can't you just do that another time, sir? Really? But anyways, to continue with more casting facts, guess who was considered to play Guy, Rosemary's husband in the movie? Jack Nicholson. Is this a trend in the Behind the Movie podcast? Because in the first episode, in The Exorcist, we learned that Jack Nicholson was also considered to play a really important part in that movie. It's crazy how many times he's been considered for roles. I can't wait to look into more movies later on and find out that he's almost been cast in all of them. I just think that was something interesting to point out there. And in casting the film's secondary actors, I thought this was extremely interesting because as an artist myself, listen to this, Polanski actually drew sketches of what he envisioned these characters to look like, and then Paramount, the casting directors, actually went with the sketches that he had to look for people that looked and gave off the same vibes, and he especially drew sketches of the Coven people, and apparently they go really well together, and I think that's such a cool way to cast your movie, because I think it's important when a director, a filmmaker has a vision, and he definitely seemed to have one, and I really appreciate the studio Paramount going with his vision and trying to fulfill it as much as possible. And another interesting fact, one of the scenes in the movie showing busy New York, which is a very important aspect of the movie, how there's a lack of privacy in New York City, actually had Mia Farrow running around an actual busy street. So in the movie Rosemary, she's whoa, there's so much stuff around me, and you would think it was all set up, but no, it actually happened. Mia Farrow was actually reluctant to film a scene that depicted a dazed and preoccupied Rosemary wandering into the middle of a Manhattan street, but Polanski said that since she had a pregnancy bump, that no one's gonna hit a pregnant woman in New York, and I mean, luckily she didn't get hit. But the scene ended up being successful, obviously because it's in the movie, with Farrow walking into a real traffic, and Polanski was the one to follow with a handheld camera because he was the only one on set willing to do it. And I think now, looking back, knowing this, I think it does look really realistic, and that's like a really big plus for this movie. I think Polanski paid attention to details enough to make it as realistic as possible for being a horror movie about a woman getting raped by Satan, so good job. And like I said, remember that $1.9 million budget that this movie was given? They actually ended up going $400,000 over budget because, like I was saying, Polanski paid really close attention to detail and wanted everything to be as perfect as possible, and it ended up paying off for the movie, but at the time, this was obviously a problem because when movies go off budgets, that's kind of like a big problem with studios, but at least Paramount was pretty okay with it, I guess, because they ended up actually raising the budget higher. But after the movie's production happened is where the quote-unquote curse begins. So, one of my favorite parts of the movie is the incredible score. It was composed by Christoph Komeda, and some parts were sung by Mia Farrow, like the little lullaby. I love the score so much, and when I read about this, my heart broke, honestly, because the first unlucky soul of this movie was actually the composer of the movie. The details of his death aren't really that famous. It's really hard to find a lot of details, but Polanski himself said that in the autumn of 1968, the 37-year-old Komeda was at a party and ended up having a really big fall that ended up giving him a 4-month coma. And this is where it gets a bit weird, because the same thing happened in Levin's book with the witches, because that's exactly how they tried to kill Rosemary's suspicious friend in the book, with a fall that ended up with a coma. Apparently the composer never regained consciousness and he ended up dying in Poland the following year. So that's a very weird, I guess, tie-in with the book of the original movie. But then, in April of 1969, the producer William Castle was very sick, suddenly had kidney stones. While delirious in the hospital, he hallucinated a lot of scenes from the movie apparently as he was in the hospital, and he apparently is quoted to yell, "Rosemary, for God's sake, drop the knife." Apparently he recovered, but he never made it back to Hollywood again, and people consider this to be part of the curse of the movie, that is Rosemary's Baby. Then, this is probably the one that's most well known, and at least in my opinion, the most frightening, and just it always makes me have chills when I hear it, so here we go. So Polanski had moved to California with his new girlfriend, actress Sharon Tate, and she was really big at the time. She had just come off a movie, Eye of the Devil, and she really wanted to get the role of Rosemary's Baby, like I said before, but ultimately Paramount cast Mia Farrow. Apparently Sharon Tate was on the set a lot, and people actually consider her as a ghost in the background of Rosemary's Young People Only party. So basically, like, she was just there in the back, but she's not really credited. That's why people consider her a quote-unquote ghost in the movie. So that's pretty interesting. I wonder if anybody can spot her now that we know this. And apparently during this movie was being filmed, some of her friends consider her to have been becoming really obsessed with the occult, and a friend of hers actually says that she once said, "The devil is beautiful, most people think he's ugly, but he's not." I only found that from one source, so how true that is, I don't know. I'm just gonna say that right now. But Polanski last saw Tate. By then, she was his wife, not girlfriend, and she was really pregnant. In July of 1969, he actually wrote an autobiography, and he actually said that at the time when he last saw her, he had a really funny feeling that he was never going to see her again, which I think is really sad, knowing that he actually didn't end up seeing her again, because Sharon Tate was brutally murdered on August 8th by the Manson family, and so was their unborn child and a bunch of other people who were at the house that she was having a party with, and all of this was happening while Rosemary's Baby still lingered on in the movie theater. And when this happened, a lot of people started speculating, having conspiracy theories, and internet fanatics say, like Guy Woodhouse, Polanski made his young wife a blood sacrifice for his still untouchable status in Hollywood and beyond. So people started having these theories that, like, Polanski was exactly like the guy that he ended up writing a story about in the movie, and basically did what happened in Rosemary's Baby to his wife. Again, just theories. That's what we're saying here. And others believe that the Manson murders were a moment in a grand satanic conspiracy scored by the Beatles, because the song title Helter Skelter was scrawled in blood at the crime scene. And a dozen years later, John Lennon was assassinated across the street from Dakota, the gambled landmark where Rosemary's Baby was filmed. That's weird. I've just always gotten chills when I read that, because it's weird that, like, all of these things kind of started connecting with each other, and it's unfortunate because a lot of tragedy ended up coming with it. But I was actually wondering as I was reading this, so much bad luck happened because of the production. What about the person that wrote the book originally? And actually, the original author of the book said that by 1992, he confessed to having mixed feelings about Rosemary's Baby, and he said that he suffered religious guilt. He said that his work played a whole big role in witchcraft and Satanism, and he acknowledged that his work was similar to all these people who hear backward messages in song lyrics and stuff. He said that he rarely feels regret, but he feels a lot of regret for Rosemary's Baby. But alas, the film today has a huge cult following. The film ended up being in Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments, with the scene of Rosemary being raped by Satan. And this movie today has like such a big following. Of course, so many people are still talking about these theories and whether they're true or not. I feel like it happened a lot back in the day. A lot of these movies, especially horror movies, had like a bunch of tragedies, and people started connecting the dots and why people were so scared of watching horror movies. But I do think this one wins the mark for literally the cursed movie ever made. I wonder if in the future I'll do an episode where there's another movie that has more tragedy involved with it. But definitely the thing with Sharon Tate has always given me the creeps, especially because she was pregnant and a lot of stuff was happening to Rosemary as she was pregnant, you know? But I'm going to pass it over to the conversation that me and Dominic from Dominic Talks Movies had, and I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. This part will contain spoilers, so I'm just warning you there. And yeah, I'll be back with you guys in the outro. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Behind the Movie. I'm very happy to be here with Dominic from Dominic Talks Movies. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And you guys make sure to check out Dominic on YouTube, Dominic Talks Movies, and he's also on Letterboxd and Twitter and TikTok. Everything will be linked down below, and if you're listening, it'll also be linked down below in the description of the episode. So make sure to follow him on everything. He has awesome movie content, and like he says, it's the best place to talk about movies, so make sure to check out his channel and all of his socials. And is there anything upcoming on your channel or anything that you're doing for people to know? Because I think this is a great way to get people to know more about you.
Yes, actually. So I made an announcement like a few days ago, and I am starting a podcast as well, which I'm super excited about. Ever
Awesome.
since I started YouTube, I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I figured now that I'm like actually have a decent audience, that I think now would be a good time to start one. It's basically going to be about like just a one-on-one interview talking about the movies that influenced like fellow creators to become critics or to become creators, and why those films make them so passionate about movies. And I think it'll just be a really fun way to get to know other people.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and I'm so excited to have it get started. I feel like that'll be just great to talk about movies that made us, like talking about movies, because I feel like everybody has one of those movies, and I'm just excited. So yeah, everybody, like I said, make sure to check out all of his stuff. And yeah, today we're talking about Rosemary's Baby. And if you haven't seen the movie yet, then please make sure to go watch it before this, if you care about spoilers, because we are just going to be talking about it. But yeah, make sure to watch it, make your own opinion, and then come back to this segment of the podcast if you'd like to hear a discussion. And I wanted to start off by asking you, what are just your overall thoughts and opinions on the movie? And did you have any expectations when you saw it? And how did that end up when you watched the movie for the first time?
Yeah, so I unfortunately had the displeasure of having it be very hyped up. I knew how popular and how acclaimed it was going in, which is never a good thing. And this was kind of before I had like a little phase where now, even if a film is like really critically acclaimed, I go in with as low expectations as possible. But this one, I went in with super high expectations, and I was a little bit disappointed. I think it's still a pretty good movie, but I think it's overall a film that I'm very mixed on.
Yeah, that's actually why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I saw on Letterboxd you gave it like a lower score when the average is much higher. And I think, yeah, this movie, I'm a huge fan of this movie, but there definitely are parts that I think people hype up a little too much.
Mm.
And I just think it's like it's that thing that like hype can kill a movie sometimes because it's like such a classic and
Yeah.
everybody talks so great about it that sometimes as like I feel like as a young audience I'm sometimes I don't know if this happens to you, I'm like scared to not like a movie
Yeah.
that's this popular because
100%.
yeah, like I like this movie, but it happens to me with so many other movies where I'm like, oh, I think I'm supposed to like it because I'm into film and like, it has so much praise. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
totally
honestly, I
understandable.
completely get that. Like whenever I'm going into like a super hype movie, I feel
Hmm.
I'm like almost nervous because I feel like if I don't
Yeah,
like it, people are gonna be like, "Well, why didn't you like this movie? Everyone else likes it." And when I
yeah,
don't
hmm,
like something, I just feel like it's like, well, is my opinion like not as good as everyone else's? Like, am I missing
hmm,
something? Yeah, it's a little stressful, but I've kind of come to
yeah.
terms with that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it takes a little while because yeah, at the beginning I just kind of sometimes hated my opinion when it's like no, like this whole film criticism thing literally relies on our opinion. And
Hmm.
I think people have to sometimes remember that.
Yeah.
But since you have mixed opinions on it, I'm wondering what's your least favorite part about the movie?
I think one of my main gripes with the film is specifically because of like I think similar to a lot of people, it's like a basically a cardinal sin of film if you're bored during a movie. And I thought the
Mm-hmm.
first half of this
Yeah.
movie was really slow, really boring,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit tedious to get through, which it was unfortunate because I think the second half was really good, but that first half was so boring that it like brought it down. So it's a pretty yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Like, I think it has definitely its tedious moments. I think the second half, like you said, is better because it like picks up the pace a little bit. And I
Hmm.
enjoy my fair share of like slow movies, but I remember the first time I saw it, I actually, to a certain point, found Rosemary kind of unlikable just because I kept thinking she was so like not smart throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
Like I remember the first time I saw it, like the neighbor giving her like that drink, the milk thing. I'm
Hmm.
like, girl, don't drink it. And it
Yeah.
takes her like such a long time to not drink it. I'm like, are
Yeah.
you kidding me? But like now the second time I saw it, which was like literally yesterday, I've come to terms with Rosemary. Like I kind of like her as a character, and I do really feel bad for her. Like I think that's the main point of the movie, that she just loses control over her body and just everything around her.
Yeah.
But my least favorite thing about the movie, maybe it's because I wasn't paying attention enough, but I've never really like her husband, Guy, I think is his name. Like I've never understood why like that switch that he made from like hating the neighbors and then suddenly like siding with them, because at the beginning of the movie he keeps telling Rosemary, "Oh, don't invite them over. Don't like I don't want to talk to them." And then I feel like it happens really fast
Mm.
when he's like on their side, and I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't have too much to add on to that other than like I agree that was definitely something I noticed as well.
Yeah, like it, because I like the whole idea that he was doing it for fame. I think that's what they talked about. That like,
Mm.
because he was like an actor and all that. I think
Right.
that's good, and I think it like has commentary on like show business and how people like in capitalism, like they just like they'll do anything to get to a certain point in the future instead of focusing on the now. Because he like
Right.
talked about how they'd be okay in the future and stuff, but like he did it so fast that it just bothered me because like I just think you don't go from hating someone to them being like, oh, I'm gonna just give them my unborn child or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
just
don't
thought that
know.
was kind of weird.
It's just yeah, it's like the same thing as it's not even like with this movie specifically necessarily. I just think that it's things like that where it's like a super jarring and quick character shift. I'm always kind of thrown off by stuff like that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think there are probably instances where it works. I can't really think of any right now, but like generally speaking, if someone has a change of character like with the snap of a finger, it's like kind of confuses me and I don't know, does that kind of stuff doesn't really work for me.
And do you have a favorite part about the movie, or is it just like you're just mixed about the entire thing?
I'd say I'm pretty mixed about it, but I think the second half, I really do like the second half a lot. I think it really like when it picks up, it gets more
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah.
I do like as weird as it might be to say, like he's a terrible person, but Roman Polanski can definitely make a
Yeah.
good movie. Um,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
think I honestly thought Mia Farrow was also very good, which
Yeah, she is really
so
good in
yeah,
this movie.
she was really good in that.
Yeah, and when you said about Roman Polanski, yeah, we do not support him here. We're
No,
just talking about the really good movie that I
yeah.
think he made. But
Hmm.
yeah, I like to separate the art from the artist a lot of times with these
Yeah.
situations. So Yeah. I would say that my favorite part about the movie is weirdly that like dream sequence. It's
Mm,
really gross to get through. Like I've always been very like turned off by it because it's very uncomfortable. But I actually think it works really well because I feel like it's very realistic in a dreamlike sense. Like I feel like he nailed that like whole dream, or I guess you could even question if it was even a dream because like it did happen. She was raped by Satan. And
yeah,
I think that works really well. And I like how this movie, for being a horror movie, it doesn't really show anything supernatural. It's just as realistic as possible. And I
right.
also really like that throughout we're just like in Rosemary, like through Rosemary's eyes, and we're not in with her, we're looking at her, like she's just constantly being watched, or we're in her perspective, and it kind of just always gives me an uneasy vibes to it because it's rare that we're not with her. I can't even think of a scene where it's like just she's not anywhere there at all, and I think that's very interesting that he was able to do that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And like I got that same sort of uneasy vibe when there's a film like this where
Hmm.
it's like you hardly ever take your eyes off the main character, especially in a horror movie. It feels like the camera is like a person, like you're watching her or
Yeah.
something, and it's
Hmm.
really, I don't know, it's really creepy, and I think.
Yeah, and like there's just so many scenes where I'm like it's this is the type of movie where sometimes I feel like a scene lingers on too much and I'm like just take it off, but it like I feel like it makes us feel like the character because she was just like stuck in this place, in this apartment, and
Right.
in this like claustrophobic setting that I think the movie has, with all
Hmm.
the neighbors coming in, and like even when she goes out to the city there's so many people around her at all times. She like never has privacy, and we like learn throughout the movie that she can't even trust her husband because he's
Hmm.
like rude to her all the time and just mean and doesn't want her to like fit in this home that she's trying to make. So yeah, I think definitely he did a good job in making us feel like Rosemary, which I think is important for a movie like this because we're just constantly in her shoes, and I think that worked really well in this one.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and I like me a good claustrophobic horror movie. Those, I mean,
Yeah.
I myself am a bit claustrophobic, so those ones kind
Yeah.
of get under my
Hmm.
skin a little bit, and I mean that's a good
Yeah.
thing because when a movie gets under my, especially a horror movie gets under my skin,
Hmm.
it's doing its job. So I gotta
Yeah,
respect that.
exactly. Hmm. And do you have any like underlying messages that you've seen during the movie? Because I've heard of a lot of good ones on the internet, and I'm wondering if you know of any.
I I've definitely heard that people have these, but I couldn't really think of any myself. I haven't seen it in a while. And I probably like I do remember most of the movie, but yeah, I can't remember if I had any of those like when I finished watching.
Yeah, that's fair because I just think the movie is one that like you have to keep on watching it to really
Mm,
like see everything. Because
right.
like definitely the first time I saw it, I like we've talked about this, but I liked it, but I just didn't get the hype in a sense that I'm like, I mean, it's like a pretty straightforward horror movie. Like
Yep.
it's just there's an antichrist baby now, like it's just that type of movie. But
Hmm.
like on my second rewatch, like I noticed a lot of like I started noticing different things, and now that I'm in film, like I noticed a lot of themes about like femininity. I also like noticed some stuff that like movies nowadays like have taken from Rosemary's Baby. I don't know if you've seen the movie
Okay.
Mother, but
I
like
haven't,
it's
but I want to.
it's so inspired by this movie, and like I rarely noticed that before.
Mm,
They have very similar posters, which I did know about, but
okay.
like just that whole idea of like neighbors coming in at all times, and like it's just cool to see how like a movie from the 60s is able to just inspire movies today. And I just like I really appreciate when movies do that, that like they're just able to transcend through time, and I think this one does. Honestly, like I don't know if you have anything to counter against that, but I think it works pretty well today. And especially with the whole thing about like Guy doing the whole thing for fame, I think that's also something that like obviously in this movie it's in an extreme way, but I like how he there's like a line at the end of the movie where he's like, oh, we're gonna be just fine, like it's all gonna work out. I think he even says like we can just have another baby. Like he completely just misses everything that happened to her, and it's just like that whole mentality of thinking about the future and just wanting to get somewhere and being obsessed with that and not even thinking of what you're doing in the moment.
Mm.
So yeah, I really like that the movie focuses on that a good bit.
Yeah, that was definitely like some good stuff there, and But what about what you said about like older movies? How I love how when old movies like are being able to inspire future movies. That's something that
Mhm.
I really do appreciate about this movie. And I did actually, now that you talk about it, I remember seeing the trailer or something for Mother a while ago,
Mhm.
and I kind of thought about it. I'm like, yeah, this seems like a same sort of vibe. And
Yeah.
I do like, because that's something that doesn't necessarily impact my experience when I'm watching a movie, but like afterwards when I'm like kind of whatever,
Mhm.
if I'm doing research about it or learning more about it, and I learn that it's like a really influential film, it influenced like a ton of movies after. I always think that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and I'm wondering at the end of the movie, like at the end of the movie, we obviously don't see the baby. And actually, before let me not get ahead of myself. What do you think about like Polanski not wanting to show the baby to the audience? Because I think it works, but I'm
Hmm.
wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I think that does too. I love always I'm a sucker for a little bit of like ambiguity in a film when, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the director kind of leaves it up to your own interpretation or whatever. And
Yeah.
I like I like that, those sort of decisions, and I definitely think it worked in this film.
Yeah, that's also one of my favorite things that horror movies can do. It's the reason why I love Black Christmas so much because like
Mm,
for
right.
a lot
Yeah.
of it we don't even see who's doing all of this and we don't see a ton of it, but like it's just left for your interpretation.
Hmm.
And yeah, and like funny enough, I was just looking at some of the submissions I had for like the question of the week for this week, which was what do you think about when you hear Rosemary's Baby? And someone said that they think because they hadn't seen the movie and they said that they think about like a demon baby. And it's I thought that was so funny because you never even see the baby. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, I think of like a red baby with horns. And it's just like funny because you just literally never see the baby. And I feel like if I would have watched this movie when I was like way younger, I would have been really pissed off by that because when I was like younger, I used to hate when movies wouldn't show me things. But like I just think it really adds to that fear fast factor, and like her reaction, I just think says it all.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that scream that she has is just great. I really really liked that. But I was gonna ask at the end of the movie, she kind of like accepts this baby, and I just like I've always wondered if you think she ended up raising this child at the end, or I just don't know, because at the end she starts like rocking the baby. She like tells the Satan lady like, "Oh, you're rocking the baby too hard. Like that's why the baby keeps crying." And she kind of has like a gentle face to her when she's like looking at the baby, and I've always just wondered what the heck happened after that, cuz like I don't know. Did she keep the baby? What did she do with the baby?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think probably I she might have. I think that's definitely a possibility. But yeah, no, it's kind of, it's a little bit like creepy because like you could think of like certain things like maybe she's like, oh well, she's like gone insane, she's like kind of just come to
Mhm.
terms with this thing
Yeah.
that she made, and it's like,
Mhm.
why are you doing this? Like,
Yeah,
I
why
was
are you doing that?
confused. I'm like, you don't need to do this. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
was
wonder if
just.
she did come to terms with it, because like it's kind of what the movie like kind of lends itself into, which is so sad because she was like throughout the movie so excited for the baby, for it to like turn out not even, because she says like, oh, its eyes, where are its eyes? So I
Mhm.
just think that like her coming to terms with it, I mean, now that I think about it, I guess it is kind of her character, because I don't even know if that's like the smart thing to do, or if it's just her like coming to terms with it, like being a mother, and how like moms just like accept their kids as whatever they are, or
Right,
whatever.
right.
I guess you could say that,
Yeah.
especially because this movie came out like in the 60s, and like there were more like like obviously motherhood is still a thing today. I'm not saying it's not, but it was just very more like classic, so it was just like going back to the idea that like women are just made to be mothers. So like
Hmm.
whatever happens, she has to take care of this baby because that's like that's
That's
like a
like her
woman's
job
instinct.
almost, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like her job almost.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say that. I don't know
Hmm.
if that's like a big reach or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand that, and I think, but that actually is a good way to kind of look at it, because like maybe she didn't actually come to terms with it, but she just knows that that's kind of like what
Hmm.
she thinks her role is. She's supposed to take care of this baby because it's her baby. So
Hmm. Yeah, like what else is there to do now that like
yeah,
your baby
right.
is just here? Yeah. And I've always like I've always also wondered like why they chose her to like have this baby, cuz like I guess it's because she was so like, I guess, innocent. They just wanted to get somebody like that to just carry this baby in her, because
Mhm.
like she acts like a child almost, like in the first half like of the
Yeah.
movie, and then she just changes when she starts getting pregnant, when she like gets like cuts her hair and all of that. And I want to ask, like, I've always wondered what that really meant, like that transformation that she had from like, because she had like a little haircut like this, and then she kind of had like a bob, so like she kept on cutting her hair, and
Mhm.
she just changed so much. So I'm like, I always wonder what that meant, if you have anything to say and add to that.
Right. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily like off the top of my head if I can think of
Mm-hmm.
something that what that means like in terms of like themes or something like that. But
Yeah.
I mean, I know for a fact that like there are some people that I know that whether it was like during quarantine or just in
Mm-hmm.
general, when people are nervous, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go like cut my hair or something. And so
Me.
maybe she was like freaking out,
Yeah.
and then she's like, oh, I gotta keep cutting my hair.
You're
Ah,
actually right. Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. I was also like thinking right now too, like, cuz I feel like people, when her friends came over, they like noticed the change, cuz they're like, I think somebody said a line, "Oh, you're so pale, like you're so
mhm,
pale, you're so this," like just basically saying her like quote unquote ugly qualities. And like, I don't know, I guess it's just like so many people were shocked at her appearance sometimes, that maybe it's like also trying to say that like, I don't know, like people equal pregnancy to like beauty. That's like when like you're supposed to be your best because you're like doing this like really great thing, but she's like not doing that. So I don't know. I've always just wondered, because like I think she does have such a big transformation, and obviously half of it is because like you said, she's nervous because like there's a whole thing inside her, and she
mhm,
keeps questioning like if it's okay and if it's not.
right.
And this movie also made me look at like pregnancy in a different way, because like in the movie she's obviously like her body is holding something that like she doesn't know about. It's like inhabiting a foreign being, and like that's kind of what pregnancy is, like even in a non-horror way, like this movie, like you're just kind of having like something that just like that you've never known before, and like it doesn't technically like belong to you.
Mhm.
And I think that idea of like just your body being inhabited by something, like I think this movie is really good at showing like just the horrors that like pregnancy can have, even though this is in a very extreme way.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually I have a thing that I just thought about right now with the
Yeah.
same sort of thing about kind of like like sort of something inhabiting you, and especially
Hmm.
with this movie with it being like actually Satan. I
Yeah.
had a connection that there's this show that I watched. I don't remember how long ago it was, but I was probably like 13 or 14.
Hmm.
I don't know if I should have been watching it, but anyway, it's called The Stand. It's based on a
Hmm.
Stephen King book, I think. And like
Oh, let me see, look
there's
it
a
up.
plot line where one of the dudes, I think his name is like Randall, and he's supposed to
Hmm.
be like the personification of the devil, and the same thing sort of happens where he impregnates a woman. She kind of is going
What?
crazy, and like she ends up like actually killing herself because of how stressed she is, and she's like,
Hmm.
I have the devil's baby. And it's like the same sort of thing where it's just like you don't know what is actually inside you, and it's just like starts to kind of
Hmm.
like lose yourself. And yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool connection, and maybe it was inspired by Rosemary's Baby, who knows.
Yeah, and also like now that you say that too about a TV show, I was also thinking of like American Horror Story. That's like the plot of the first season, Murder House. It's just that she gets pregnant and she notices that something's like off and wrong, and then like when the baby's born, it's like the spawn of Satan. So it's
Hmm.
like
Okay.
pretty similar. Yeah, I wonder if like all of this, like I wonder if before Rosemary's Baby, because I think I know this movie is inspired by a book, but I wonder if before then there were any like Antichrist movies, because I know the Omen, which is like another
Right. Yeah.
really good movie, but I can't. Let me look up actually, when did that movie come out, because I know it's like, I think it's from the 70s or 60s. Oh no, came out in 76, so that was after. So
Okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder if Rosemary's Baby is like one of the first or the first one to like
Right.
come out.
Yeah, and I think it's I would say there's definitely, like you said, it was like loosely based on a book or something. And
Mhm.
I can't really be surprised because especially, back in the day in like I would probably like the early 1900s, maybe even earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And because of these people that were like so, I usually it's like people who are religious
Mm-hmm.
and they're like afraid of the devil and like supernatural and they're super like superstitious and all of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so I'm sure there's have been stories like carried on from back in those days
Yeah.
about the devil impregnating a woman, maybe when like maybe someone who was like
Mm-hmm.
kind of not right in the head made
Yeah.
up that story and said like I'm pregnant with the devil's baby, and someone's like, oh, that's a cool story, I can tell or something. But yeah, I
Yeah.
just thought that could be
Yeah,
something
and
that it
also,
stemmed from.
yeah, the movie has some like talk about witches and like that was
Hmm.
definitely something back then, like the witch
Right.
trials and all of that.
Yeah.
Because they, yeah, like I think she calls them witches, like these women and these people near her. So like, yeah, definitely, like you could definitely see that this movie was made like back in the day because it does have things that like I feel like are more likely to be talked about before the 60s and stuff
Hmm.
rather than today. I also really like in this movie the parts where Rosemary is like, because she's a victim, but I feel like for, I think the second half, which is when it starts getting good, she's kind of investigating a lot and she's doing a lot of questioning, which I thought was really good that she did that. Because even though I literally said the first time I saw this movie I didn't like her because I thought she was a little bit dumb, I think in the later half of the movie she starts like actually realizing that something's wrong, and I like it when characters in horror movies, especially women, aren't just like so submissive to what's happening. They're like actually like, oh, let me try to do something about it. So I do appreciate that we got action from her,
Hmm.
even though it didn't work in her favor because it
Right.
still ended up being a
Yeah.
pretty bad fate.
Not a great situation for her, but yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's something that I do appreciate regardless of the outcome, what happened. That's still like Rosemary's still a good character in that way, and that's like
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, like a good way to make a female character, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
films, modern films, make like female characters that are just not realistic or whatever. And there have been
Mm-hmm.
great examples of these characters in the past, and this is one obviously there where she kind of realizes something's up. She wants to do something about it, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just think that's she makes for, I think she's a good character. I think that's one of the positives I have with it.
Yeah, and like again, just like Mia Farrow's performance, I think just works so well in this movie because like it really feels realistic. Like this woman is going through this, and I
Hmm.
just really liked that happened.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Um,
She was definitely amazing in this, that's for sure.
yeah, I think she was like snubbed an Oscar.
Mm,
I don't know if she was nominated, but I don't think she won if she was nominated.
okay,
I don't
I
know who
see.
won either, but I definitely think she should have gotten an Oscar. Maybe she did win, and I'm just like talking nonsense right now. But I'm pretty sure I've heard people say that she didn't win.
Mm.
So
I
yeah,
Yeah, I would, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if she won because she was that good, I think.
yeah, you're right. That's some tea about the Oscars.
Yeah.
And also, it's a horror movie, and they never recognize horror movies.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or you'd want to talk about the movie?
Okay, wait, so I just looked it up.
Uh-huh.
She wasn't even nominated.
Oh, yeah, you see? There you go.
There you go. So yeah, definitely snubbed for that, I would say.
Yeah.
Because yeah, she was fantastic in it. And I mean, like, I do have enough positives with the film that like I am mixed on it for sure, and I do think the first half does drag a ton. It's pretty boring, but
Mm-hmm.
I do have enough positives about it to where I can appreciate it for what it is, and one that I do think I will appreciate more when I rewatch it one of these days. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm honestly excited for it because I it's obviously praised for a reason, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe something was up when I watched it for the first time. Maybe I'll notice more on the second time. I don't know. I just think I'm going to like it a lot more.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation because, like, I think there is a lot to love about the movie, but I totally get why, like, you're mixed on it because I definitely think it could be, like, kind of a snooze fest. for the first half, like we keep talking about. But I think like looking at this movie, like after you're into film, I think it's like way more interesting in my opinion.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
because there's like a lot more than you could just pick up on that I just really like. And also, I'm a sucker for horror movies that have like cursed backstory. That's the whole reason why I'm
Oh,
doing this
yeah.
episode. Yeah, because like in the first half, like I just talk about so many like conspiracies and like just a bunch of stuff happened around when this movie was around, and whether you believe it or not, I just think it like makes it that much more interesting, like just the making of the movie and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Dominic. For wait, did you want to say something else? I think
Oh
I'm
no,
cutting
I
you
was just gonna say something about like the films with like
Yeah,
the
go
cursed
ahead.
backstories. Is like, the one I've heard a ton about is The Exorcist.
Yeah.
That's like a super cursed movie. I was like, I haven't seen that movie yet either, which I
Oh,
probably should. But
yeah,
yeah,
I really
that's
like that one.
yeah, it looks really good, and I definitely should see that soon. But yeah,
Yeah, that's the whole reason this podcast started, because that was my first episode about The
Right.
Exorcist.
Yeah.
Because like there's just so much to talk about that one, and that's another one that like I totally get if people don't like it, because it could be boring and slow sometimes, but I love it to death for that. Like I just think it works so well. So yeah, I'm excited for you to watch it. I wish I could watch that movie for the first time because I'm just such a huge fan of it. So yeah, that's cool that you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, thank you so much, Dominic, for being a part of today's episode. And like I said, everyone, go check out his channel and make sure to just stay up to date with his stuff because he has a new podcast coming out soon. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that conversation and today's episode. It really means a lot that you listened. It really means a lot that you listened. So the question of the week for next week is, what is your favorite whodunit movie and why? And you guys can submit that by either sending me a DM or you can send a voice message on anchor.fm/behindthemovie, and you just send a voice message. You can say your name or choose not to, and I'll include that in the podcast for next week. And that's about it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching or listening. It really means a lot, and I hope to catch you next time in Behind the Movie. If anybody has any suggestions for any movies they want covered in Behind the Movie, let me know, comment down below, or let me know on Instagram, Twitter, just somewhere. Just let me know if you want a movie to be covered. I hope you learned something new about Rosemary's Baby today. That's always the goal with this series, and I hope you guys have a really nice and spooky rest of your day. Bye, everyone.